for the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's video, oh my gosh guys, we're gonna make probably my favorite bag of this year. This is definitely so far my favorite bag of 2024. This bag is not quick, it is not hard, and you're gonna be obsessed with it once you make it, I promise you. Today, we're making the Travelnizer, and this comes to us from Sewfistcated Craft Designs. You guys, look how stinking cute this bag is. You know, everybody I show this to right off the bat, they're like, is it a lunch bag? No, it is not a lunch bag. You can use it as one if you want. It's not a lunch bag though. This bag is so stinking cute. This is also the bag for March for the Bag Making Bee Club, meaning in the Bag Making Bee Club box, you have everything you need to make this bag right here. It is so good. So, as you can see, this is just kind of like a basic little tote kind of compartment bag. It has two handles. You could do a crossbody strap. I'm not doing it today, but if you want to do a crossbody strap, you could. The magic is when we open this sucker up. It is so cool. So we have two zippers on the top here. Open it up. So first I'm going to show it to you like this. Very pretty, very colorful. However, the magic, I'm going to show you. Ba-bam. And ba-bam. I can't even get it all in the shot. Look at this. Look at that. Oh, I gotta zip it. I got my zipper open too much. Let me just zip that up for you guys. Look how stinking cute this is. All the pockets. The intention of this is like a travel bag, like for toiletry items. You can hang it on the back of your door. However, personally, I don't use stuff like this for traveling with my toiletries. I would 1000% use this as like a craft bag, as a travel sewing bag, not even just a travel bag, just as like a sewing storage bag. Maybe you're doing a lot of English paper piecing. Maybe you're going on a sewing retreat and you need all of your tools. You can take everything with you in this bag. So the back looks just as good as the front. Look how beautiful that is. This is such a fun bag. Let's walk through every pocket real quick. So on the top flap here, we have a clear zip pocket, and underneath it we have a mesh zip pocket. On the main top panel here, we have a large clear pocket. However, when you open that up, you actually have a divided slip pocket that's also a mesh pocket. So this is great if you're like, I'm gonna put my rotary cutter in here, I'm gonna put some scissors in here, and then I'm going to roll up some fabric, some fat quarters, half yards, and I'm gonna stick that in here on top of it. Really great way to utilize space. On the bottom main compartment here, we have another large zip pocket, and then this one has elastic bands. If you're not interested in the elastic bands or the mesh pocket, you can switch this around however you want. You could definitely do another mesh pocket down here if you'd like. However, the elastic bands are really great for things like putting your scissors in there or toiletry items, you know, small things, maybe your razor, things like that. And then on the very, very bottom, we have another larger clear pocket. And I just love how it all folds and flips together. I love that these flaps come down and kind of protect everything inside. It is so useful. And I'm going to tell you guys, this is not a hard bag. It's really not. Is it beginner friendly? Have you ever sewn a zipper before? If you have, I would say go for it. The thing is yeah, there's a lot of zippers. There are, let's see, how many zippers are there? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 inside zip pockets and then 1 large outside zip pocket. There is one step that is a little challenging, and it's at the very end, and I'm going to walk you through it as best I can. However, that's going to be the same level of challenge for everybody. So I would definitely say confident beginner. If you're a confident beginner, you've made a zip pouch before, I would say go for it. And especially if you have the kit for March, the clear vinyl we're using is perfect for this. It's not super stiff, so it's not going to fight you when you're turning things in and out. It is sticky because it is a clear vinyl, so that means sticky means it will stick to metal surfaces mostly. It doesn't have a sticky substance on it or anything, it'll stick to metal surfaces. So we're going to talk about tips for how to deal with clear vinyl when we're sewing like normal. However, this is a really good bag that I think everybody should make, and honestly, I already have plans to make this bag multiple more times in a lot of different materials. I will tell you though, speaking of materials, in today's tutorial, we're using a lot of bonded nylon, and nylon is like, have you, like, kind of think of like a toiletry bag, or like, have you seen like Stony Clover bag? You hear that? It's very easy to clean, very easy to wipe down. The inside is also nylon. So the lining here inside is also a nylon material. It's not water resistant canvas. The binding we're using is a pre-cut 1-inch wide water resistant canvas binding. It works perfect for this bag. So thank you as always to Sewfistcated Craft Designs for allowing us to use your patterns on our channel. Oh my gosh, I love their patterns so much. I tell you what, Jassy is coming out with a new pattern all the time, and every single one of her patterns is like, what? where did this come from? It's like she has like the world of bags in her brain that none of us have access to, and she comes out with these amazing patterns. I just love them so much. They're so good. So make sure you go check them out. Go grab some more patterns. I know I have all of them. I have all the patterns, and they're all on my list because I love them all so much. I can never choose, but go tell me which one you want to see next on the channel, and we'll add it to the list. Oh, I love it. If you're interested in joining the bag making bee club, I'm gonna have a link down below for boxes. I don't know if this box is still in stock or not. I know this was a really popular one. We hyped it up a lot because I really wanted to make sure that everybody who wanted one could get one. However, they are limited, so you're gonna have to reach out to Bag Making Bee Club and see if there's any more of these boxes available. I would say not likely. However, go try. But if you wanna join the subscriptions for future boxes, I'll have a link down below for you to do that. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave them down in the comments section. All of these links and things will be down in the description. I have links for a lot of items. If you see an item that I don't have linked, go ahead and leave a comment and I'll do my best to find a link for you. If I can't find it, somebody else might be able to. When it comes to material for this bag, once again, I'm gonna say, unless you have an industrial machine, I would stay away from vinyl. I think there's a lot of layers going on here. I personally wouldn't want to make this with vinyl. Bonded nylon, any sort of a nylon material is going to be great for this. So I have a link down below with various shops where I get mine from. Also, quilt cotton would be wonderful here if you wanted to have like a quilted version of this. I think that would also be great. That's on my list. I want to do quilt panels and I want to quilt it onto foam and make another version. I think it would be beautiful. All right, guys, let's get started. Okay, so before we get started, let's open this beautiful box. First of all, look how stinking cute this is. I love this. Gabby's been having such a good time making all these different boxes custom every month. So if you're a collector like I am, you're gonna want to hold on to the box each month because they are so cute. And here's one little detail that I wanted to show you. When you open it up, here's our logo for the Bag Making Bee Club, but look, it's got a little flower in their hair. I know, it's just a really beautiful detail. I love that. This is why, again, I would keep the box. So when you open up the box, ta-da! First, we have a temporary tattoo. This is so fun. Honestly, Mila already claimed this, but it's a little temporary tattoo. This is great, especially if you have kids or if you just, you know, it's just summer, it's fun. And then you're gonna have your honey stick, which is common with the bee boxes because again, it's the bee box. And then we're gonna have some mesh. So I'm gonna grab the finished bag so I can kind of show you where things go. So you see the mesh, we have two mesh pockets. We have this small zipper mesh pocket on the top panel here, and then we have this awesome back hidden mesh pocket right there. So that's what the mesh is for. And then we have the lining material. Now, if you'd like to switch up your exterior and your lining, I do believe you'll have enough material to do that. I haven't done it myself, so I can't say for sure, but this is that bonded nylon. It is so good. So it's a really easy to wipe down, keep clean nylon. It's not really heavy. It has a nice backing. It's not stretchy. It doesn't fray. It's great. I'm going to iron this out. When I iron this, I do iron it on the back. So you might want to set it to like a medium heat setting, not too hot, but you're going to iron it from the back side. I wouldn't iron it from the front side. But you're gonna have a generous amount of this bonded nylon material here. And then for what we're using as the exterior, you have more bonded nylon. Now this bonded nylon is a print. This is why this is like the best travel bag, craft bag, toiletry bag, kid bag with like for road trips. I mean, it's just the best bag because it's going to be so easy to keep clean with the material we're using, but none of the material is difficult to work with, which is why I also say this is a confident beginner bag. I really do believe that. It's going to take you a while. It's going to take all of us a while, but it's not terribly challenging and the material is pretty easy to work with. Okay, so next we have our webbing, and this is for the two handles. Now we're not doing the crossbody strap, we're using the box kit. But if you wanted to add the crossbody strap, you definitely could using your own webbing. But this is the webbing. This is gonna be enough for both handles. And then of course we have our beautiful tag this month. I love it. It's a very simple tag, but it pops so well in the bag. And then we have our binding. Now we're using 1 inch wide water resistant canvas for our binding. And it is already pre-cut. You don't have to cut it down. And it's a very generous amount. And you're gonna use most of this. You're gonna have a little bit of extra, definitely enough for a smaller project, but you're gonna use most of this. We have a lot of binding, and we're gonna talk about different ways to use the binding. Some that are more simple, some that, you know, might require a little bit more work. Next up, we have the elastic. And let's just take a quick look at the elastic pockets. So once we, again, open this back up, you can see on the bottom portion over here, we have these elastic pockets here, and you can change them up however you'd like. Honestly, if you don't really feel like you need the elastic pockets, you can leave them out. If I was just doing this for me, I probably wouldn't even put the elastic on here because I would probably just shove this with fabric, or honestly, if it was a travel bag, underwear, things like that. Like, I'd probably just fill it up. Like, this is just a nice big open pocket. I would fill it up with big stuff, but it's nice to have the elastic because you could still use it that way, like I'm saying, but then if you wanted to like put hairbrushes or scissors, things that you want to kind of keep in place that need a big space but need to stay put, this was great for that. And then we have our zippers. Now, we have a lot of zippers on this bag. You're gonna have 7 zipper pulls and a whole bunch of zipper tapes and all of your beautiful zipper pulls. These are so pretty. They're gold. They're like little teardrop kind of. Oh, I love them. They look perfect on this bag. And finally, we have our clear vinyl. You're gonna wanna open this up and let it sit out so you can get all those creases out. Again, what you could do if you wanted to is you could just kind of take your iron and iron your pressing mat or iron your ironing board to get the ironing board nice and hot, and then you can put your clear vinyl on top of it to help smooth out any of the creases. Just give it some time. Another option, honestly, is if you're not gonna be making this right away, take the clear vinyl out and flatten it out. Maybe like hang it over a chair or just flatten it out on a flat surface and just let it sit for a few days, and some of those crinkles will come out on their own. And that's everything in the box. I'm so excited. I hope you guys love this material so much. Okay, so for this bag, I would suggest you have like a yard of exterior material and a yard of lining material. It's probably more than you need, but I always prefer to have more than necessary. I'm using bonded nylon. So any sort of like nylon material that has a backing on it. So there's like Luxe nylon and things like that, which doesn't have the backing on it, and it can fray a little bit and be a little bit more slippery. It's great for a lot of projects, but for this project specifically, you want everything to be really easy to use. And then I would say about a yard, maybe half a yard of clear vinyl. You can use a printed clear vinyl here. That would be awesome. We're using this, I would say this is a more lightweight clear vinyl. It's not really stiff. It's easy to manage. I will tell you, when I made the first bag, I actually didn't need to use the paper at all on my sewing machine. I didn't have any problem with it sticking. It's not going to be really stiff either, so when you have to turn pieces in and out, right side in and out, it's not going to fight you. So I do think this is a great vinyl, especially if this is the first time you're working with a bag like this where there's a lot of clear vinyl and other materials. And then you're going to have some mesh. You're going to need like 14 by 9 inches of mesh. So if you just get a packet of mesh from By Annie, that's more than enough. So the only stabilizer I'm using today are going to be 2 cuts of foam. This is going to be for the front and back main panels. I'm not putting any foam in the side panels. You definitely can if you'd like. It provides a lot of beautiful structure, but for today's, we're just going to use foam on the front and back main panels. So I'd say like a 1/4 yard, half a yard, depending on how much foam you want to use. If you want to use an adhesive foam, that's going to be really helpful because you can just stick it to the material. I'm not using an adhesive foam, I'm just using a regular foam, but I am going to actually be using adhesive spray to help hold it in place. And maybe some tape, because I don't love basting foam down. We'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, I'm not going to be doing the piping today, so I don't have any piping material. For zippers, you're going to need about 2.5 to 3 yards. I would go more towards 3 yards of zipper tape, and then 7 zipper pulls. 2 for the main zipper on the exterior of the bag, and then 5 for the pockets inside. For your binding, bias tape, pre-made binding, anything like that, you're going to want at least 10 yards. I know it's a lot. You can buy a lot of these things in that size, but at least 10 yards. You're gonna be using a lot of this today. And you can mix it up. It doesn't all have to be the same. So if you're like, I have a few different colors, definitely work with what you got. But if you want to have all in one, at least 10 yards. I get a little bit more, as always. For your elastic band, you're going to want at least 26 inches of elastic material. For your strap handles, you're going to want at least 32 inches of webbing. And if you're using a crossbody strap, then of course that's always up to you how you want to do that. But this is what I'm using today. And then as always, a bag tag. So here's most of the other stuff I'll be using today. It's very likely I'm forgetting something. Lots and lots of clips. Lots of clips. We're gonna be clipping a lot today. So with these plastic clips, I would also suggest you have some of these, they're like hair clips, but these are gonna be really helpful at holding very specific pieces down. I'll talk about that when we get to it. Lots of double-sided tape, guys. I'm not even joking. I use so much double-sided tape on this. Now, I used more than the pattern even recommended you use because we're gonna change up some of the methods a little bit, but I like to have 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch side double-sided tape. You're gonna want double-sided tape that is a wash-away double-sided tape, something that's not super sticky. So there is like leather double-sided tape that is so sticky. You don't want that. You want something easy because I am gonna be layering up this tape. And even though it is a wash-away, easy, lightweight tape, I did find that my needle was starting to get a little sticky. So we're gonna talk about that as we get to it. I have some 505 spray here. This is for my foam. I don't love basting foam down, just personal preference. I just don't love it. A lot of times I find that those basting stitches do show up in the final bag, no matter how careful I was with my seam allowance. So I just don't prefer basting. I'm gonna try using this. If I need to, I can also enlist the help of tape. We're gonna work with that as we get to it, but if you do have a foam that has an adhesive backing, which is really popular right now, this is a great project for that. My needle today is gonna be the Microtex 8012 needle. Have extras, especially if you're using a lot of tape like I am. If you get to a point where you've just been sewing over tape for so long that your needle is driving you crazy, you gotta change it out. Take it out, get a new one. My bobbin thread is a Gutermann thread. This is just a polyester thread from Joann's. And then my top thread, as always, is the Fairy Floss. This is a Tex 45 weight thread from Wizardry Stitchery. This works great on the needle part of my sewing machine. However, it can be a little thick for some domestic machines. So if you want to do a safer one, you can do a Tex 35 weight thread. That just means it's a little bit thinner. I have a lighter to help clean up any loose threads. 3 different marking tools, one for vinyl, an air erasing marking tool, and a chalk marking tool. 1 inch by 6 inch ruler as always. Seam ripper. I'm not gonna tell you how much I had to seam rip the first time I made this bag because of my own silly mistakes, but you just have the seam ripper. You might need it. And then a stiletto, which is very, very useful, especially considering how much binding we're working with today. The stiletto is just gonna make it very easy to do. And then paper tape as always. This is great at just holding pieces down, and you can sew over this tape. It's really easy. So I'll be honest, as many pockets and things are in the final product of this, there's really not a ton of pattern pieces. Prepping for this is pretty quick. So using pattern piece A, this is A, A1, A2, A3, and Z1, you're gonna cut 2 pieces of clear vinyl. Now, I always like to have an idea of what the finished pieces are. So for this pattern piece A, these 2 pieces of clear vinyl, this is what they are. These 2 pieces right here. They're the big pieces. So think about that. If you really want this to be clear and you're using a bunch of different clear vinyl, the clear vinyl goes here on the pattern piece A. And if you want the more decorative vinyls to go, you know, over here where you don't really need to see inside of it, then use those here. I would prefer a clear vinyl because you can see this is a vinyl pocket with mesh pockets behind it. So I want to be able to see through this. So I would use totally clear vinyl here, and then if I had like a printed vinyl, I'd use them on these pieces over here. Just something to think about. So the A pieces are these 2 pieces right here. And then you're gonna have 2 cuts of your exterior material. So obviously this is the exterior of the bag, front and back, and then 2 cuts of lining material. And then you're gonna have 2 smaller cuts of your foam or Decovil Heavy, Fusible Fleece, whatever you're comfortable with. Next we have pattern piece B. Now while pattern piece A was for the big pieces here, so everything you see right here, pattern piece B are for these top and bottom pieces here. That's pattern piece B. So if you're using a lot of different material, that's what you gotta think about. That's what this is for. So from pattern piece B, you're gonna need 2 cuts of clear vinyl. We are gonna be chopping up this clear vinyl to make multiple pockets. And then you're gonna have 2 cuts of exterior material, or this isn't actually exterior material until you open it. But if you wanted to use like a 3rd fabric, this is a great place for it. Something else that pops. Maybe you have a panel, like a small panel, this would be a great place for it. And then 2 cuts of your lining material. Okay, next we have our mesh cuts. This is cut A4, and then this bottom one is cut B3. So the A4 one is gonna go obviously on the big pockets, it's the behind the clear vinyl pocket, and then you have a smaller mesh pocket that's gonna go on one of the smaller pockets that fold out. Next we have our C cuts, and we're gonna have 4 cuts of exterior material and then 4 cuts of lining material. And this material is gonna be used on the side of the bag. So once again, if you're looking for contrast or something and you have a different material, maybe you have a print on the front and the back and you want like a solid on the sides, these are gonna be your side cuts. And if you wanted to, you could definitely switch this around if you're using the box material and make the side on the exterior the pink. And here, I don't want you to confuse yourself because there's a lot of steps here where it can get very confusing. So I'm not gonna do that today, but if I was just doing it on my own, I might switch up a lot of these pieces to give it a lot of like contrast on the outside and the inside. Pattern pieces C3 and C4 are going to be again for the side panel, but these are gonna go with the zipper. So these attach directly onto your zipper tape to make it a little bit longer and to act as zipper ends, zipper stops. You're gonna need 1 cut of exterior and 1 cut of lining. Then we have cuts B4. It's gonna be 2 cuts, and these are actually for the hanging sleeves. Now I was a little confused what these were whenever I was first sewing this, so I'm gonna show you. So once again, let's pull this out and we open it up. You see how this piece here attaches? So how the B piece attaches to the A piece on the top and also down here on the bottom right here where these attach, those are your hanging sleeves. So I used the pink material originally. I think for this one, I'm gonna try the exterior material. But again, if you had like, let's say you had a small amount of material that was like super duper sparkly and you wanted to use it somewhere special, this is a good place to use it because you'll see it when it's closed like this. When these are folded in, you'll see it. And when it's opened up hanging, you'll see it. So it would be a great place to use some really fun stuff. So let's start with these handles. First, grab your webbing, and if you haven't already cut it down into 2 strips, you can just fold it in half like this, and then cut it right at the fold. So you have 2 equal strips. I forgot to show these 2 pieces in the materials section. This is going to be a cut of material for our swivel hook. Now this is going to be 4 inches by 2 inches. Since we're not doing the D-rings, it's not longer. So it's just a 4 inch by 2 inch cut of material, lining or exterior, whatever you want. And then I have a 1 inch swivel hook here. And this is going to be so I can clip it onto doors. I can clip it onto anything. Now you could use a swivel hook, you could use a keychain. You have a lot of options here. So get creative with this. This is from my personal stash, so what you have in the box, it might look a little bit different than this, but any type of tool to hang this is going to be useful here. So on the back of my little piece of material for my swivel hook, I marked a midpoint line, and then right above and below it, I added some pretty skinny double-sided tape. If you have material that you can just iron this instead, but what we want to do is we want to take this and fold the long edges, wrong sides together, back to meet that midpoint line. And you're going to do this for both long edges. And I just find double-sided tape is easier to work with here rather than just using clips to hold it in place. But it's totally up to you. Even if you're using the nylon material and you don't feel comfortable ironing it, you could just use clips if you don't want to use the tape. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm just going to top stitch along all 4 edges of my little connector at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now on the back side of this, measure up 1 inch from the bottom and just mark a line. And again, this is on the wrong side. And then we're going to add a couple pieces of double-sided tape just right above and right below that line. So now take your swivel hook and thread this on so that the back side or the bottom side of the swivel, the bar side, is on the back side of the material. And then remove the paper from your tape and fold the short edges of your connector, wrong sides back, to meet that line that you marked. So the top edge is going to wrap around that swivel hook and then go down to meet the bottom edge, just like that. So you can see they just kind of connect on the bottom. Now double-sided tape doesn't always work long-term with the nylon material. So I'm also going to use clips here to hold this in place because we don't add this until a bit later. So you have this, you can set this to the side. So now take your webbing for your handles and mark 2 inches in from each short edge on both handles. And if you have a right side and a wrong side for your webbing, I like to do this on the right side. That's where I'm going to be able to see it while I'm sewing. And you can see I'm just using chalk because it will just wear off as I'm working with the bag. So now take your webbing, and again, if you have a right side, wrong side, you're going to fold this wrong sides together. And we're going to just fold it in half like this. You're definitely going to want to use clips here to hold it in place. If you want to use tape, I guess you could, but I don't know if it'll be that helpful because the webbing is kind of slippery and it's pretty strong. So I don't know if it'll help you out a whole lot. All right, so once you have these folded, you're going to take this to the sewing machine and you're going to top stitch along the edge. So where the clips are, not the folded side, but the edge side of the webbing at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you're going to start and stop at those marks, those 2 inch marks. So make sure you can see them. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. So now I left the threads long. So the top thread and the bobbin thread, I left them long on each of these. And I'm looking at the bobbin side here. And I'm just going to pull my bobbin thread a little bit. And I can see a loop of my top thread. And I'm using a stiletto to just pull that top thread to the back with the bobbin thread. And I know I backstitched, but this is like double reinforcement. I just like to make sure the stitching's not going to come out. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to carefully do 2 or 3 really tight knots to hold the stitching in place. Make sure they're nice and tight and close to the material. And then I'll just clip down those long threads. And then you might notice at the end you have like, I call them little pigtails, or like 2 little tiny threads sticking out. I don't like that look. You can leave it if you want. I think it looks better without it, but you have to be careful here. I'm going to take a lighter and I'm going to very carefully just kind of boop those tails, and they'll shrink in on their own. So I'm not letting the flame touch the knot, because if you melt the knot, then you pretty much just undid all that work. Now you have no knot. So you just want it to barely touch the tips of the thread and they'll scrunch down on themselves. And now it's a nice smooth finish here. You can't see anything at all. It looks really good. So I'm gonna do that with the other 3 ends and their tails. All right, your strap handles are now done. You can set these to the side. So now we're gonna work on the main panel exterior. I have my 2 exterior main panels. So these are A pieces, and then I have the foam that goes with them, my handles, and then I have 2 bag tags. I'm gonna put 1 bag tag on the front, 1 bag tag on the back, just because I love the B bag tag, and I also love my OklaRoots bag tag. So the first thing I'm gonna work on is attaching this foam. Now this foam is a 1/4 inch shorter on all 4 edges. So if you wanna make sure you're centering it correctly, you can grab a ruler and just make a few marks on the long edges that are 1/4 of an inch in. There we go. And that just allows me to see better where I need to put my foam. I'm also gonna grab some double-sided tape here because I'm not using an adhesive foam and I'm not sure how well this is gonna hold this long term. So just to make sure my foam doesn't go anywhere, I'm gonna grab some double-sided tape. This is 1/4 inch double-sided tape, and I'm just gonna add it pretty much like let's see, like a 2 or 3 inch cut along each long edge. Not a lot. I don't want to like have a whole bunch of double-sided tape here. I just want enough to make sure the foam doesn't move around on me. Again, this is because I'm choosing not to baste it down with the sewing machine. If you want to do that, go for it. I just know me, and I really worry those basting threads will show up in the end, and I do not like that look at all. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the paper from my 4 pieces of tape here. I'm just gonna push this over for a minute and grab a piece of foam. There we go. And on the back side of my foam, I'm gonna grab my 505 basting spray, and I'm just gonna spray some adhesive on there. And now taking the back side of my main panel, I'm going to take the glue side of my foam and lay it down. And just do my best to kind of center it using those marked lines. And after I do that, even if you have an adhesive foam, it might seem flat and perfect now. Flip this over, and if you find that the front is kind of wrinkly and warped, just pull up parts of it and smooth it out. It's most important that this side is right. So pick it up, smooth it out. And it looks like the 505 spray isn't doing much of anything. It's trying, but it's not doing a whole lot. All right, but now I have it stuck in place enough that I should be able to sew this without too much problem. I'm gonna repeat that with the other main panel and piece of foam. All right, once you have your stabilizer in place, and again, remember, you can use Decovil Heavy, Decovil Light, Fusible Fleece, whatever you're comfortable working with here. I know not everybody loves using foam, that's perfectly fine. I think the foam is perfect for this bag, but you do you. What I'm doing now is I'm finding the midpoint on the top and bottom of each of these main panels. And I'm pretty sure I also use the midpoint on the sides later, so if you want to go ahead and mark those as well now, it's a great time to do it so you don't have to do it later. So now I'm going to measure down 2 inches from the top of each of these centered, and I'm going to tape down my bag tags. Once these are taped in place where you want them, I'm going to take them to the sewing machine. I'm going to top stitch along all 4 edges of each of these at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm also leaving my tails long on these ones, and I'll tie them on the back just like I did with the handles. All right, so I decided I'm gonna add a couple pieces of double-sided tape, or just 1 piece of double-sided tape to each corner to hold the corners down for the foam, because I think that might be a little tricky later when I'm sewing this in place. If the foam isn't adhered on those corners, I think that will cause a headache. So the tape is working really well on the long edges, so I'm gonna use the tape on the corners as well. Okay, so now we're gonna add the handles. So if you want to use a marking tool, go ahead and do that. And from your midpoint mark on the top of either your front or back panel, you're going to measure 2 3/8 of an inch to the right and also 2 3/8 of an inch to the left and make little marks there. Once you have that done, if you have like top stitching that you want to be on the right side, there's really no right side and wrong side with your strap. But if you have one that you want to be on the right side, make it so that the top stitching that you like is facing down along the same front as your front or back panel. And also make sure it's like this, where the raw edges are on the top and the fold is facing down. So when you look at your strap, it should be opening like this. We're gonna grab some clips, and starting with the right side here, we're gonna line up the inner edge of our webbing with that tick mark, and we're gonna clip this in place. And then you're gonna rotate the other edge over here, the right side, and then the inner edge, which is on the left of the right part of the strap. We're gonna line that up with that little tick mark as well. So once you have these clipped in place, there should be about 4 3/4 of an inch separation between the inner edges of your strap. Go ahead and repeat this with your other panel. Now I'm going to take these to the sewing machine and I'm just going to baste down these strap ends at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, your 2 main panels are all prepped and they are so pretty. The colors, you guys, the colors. I love these so much. You can set these to the side now. All right, so now we're going to work on the main panel lining. So you're going to need both of your A lining panels. So these are the big ones. You're going to need both of those. You're going to need your larger mesh cut. You're going to need your elastic. I just cut my elastic into 2 pieces of equal length. And then you're going to need your binding. And I just have a big roll of binding that I'll just be adding as I go. The first thing we want to do is add some binding to the top of our mesh pocket. I'm just going to lay this out. And I'm going to cut my binding so it's just a tidbit longer than it needs to be. I always just like to do that because I mess up a lot. I'm going to grab my double-sided tape. And now with my binding, I'm going to fold my binding. Let me see which side is the right side, wrong side. It's hard to tell sometimes with this. My right side, it's like a little bit softer. So the back side, it kind of has like a plasticky feel, and the right side has more of a fabric feel. So I have the wrong side up, and I'm going to fold this in half, wrong sides together, long sides together, and I'm just pressing to get that midpoint crease. This means I don't have to, use a ruler every time. If you prefer to use a ruler and a marking tool, then go for it. All right, I'm gonna open it back up, and then I'm gonna grab my double-sided tape, and I'm going to add some double-sided tape below that midpoint fold or mark, whatever you used. Now I'm gonna remove the paper from the tape. Then I'm gonna take my mesh, and if you have a right side or wrong side to your mesh, I can't imagine you would, but you're gonna take your mesh right side up, and you're going to line up the long top edge of your mesh right along that midpoint fold or mark, and it's gonna go over the tape. And don't worry about it being perfect. And the nice thing too about the mesh is because it has all those holes in it, what we can do now is we can just fold that binding back down and it will stick to the tape that we already added. Theoretically. If it doesn't, just grab your clips and clip it in place. It seemed like a good idea when I said it. All right, now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and let's just top stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can do it from the folded edge. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. You can see I decided to do 2 rows of top stitching. I did a second row just at 1/8 of an inch above the raw edge, just because with that water resistant canvas, it can be kind of coarse and I don't want to worry about it flipping up at any point. So that's just gonna secure it down. Now, if you have overhang like I do, you can trim it down or you can save it till later because we're gonna have to trim down the sides of the mesh anyways. But just for looking good, I'm gonna trim it down. So now grab one of your main lining panels, and if you haven't already, go ahead and mark the midpoint on all 4 edges of your lining panel. You can do it for both of them right now. All right, now with your lining panel right side up, and if you have a directional print on it, then the direction is gonna be, here's the top. Grab your mesh pocket and lay your mesh pocket right side up and center it over it. Now your mesh pockets should be wider than the panel, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about finding a midpoint mark or anything on the mesh. So moments like these are when these types of little hair clips come in handy because we can still clip the sides down. Now, one of the things you want to be careful of is making sure that it doesn't end up like this. So what I would do is I would measure the height of your finished mesh pocket and then measure that same height from the bottom of your lining panel and mark little notches on the sides, both left and right, to make sure that these are at the same point. So once you have those marked, now just take your mesh pocket and lay the top of your pocket up with those side marks first. There we go. And then go ahead and clip down the sides and the bottom of your mesh pocket. Now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna baste along the sides and the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold this in place. Make sure you keep the mesh nice and flat here. Okay, now using the midpoint mark on the top and bottom, I grabbed my ruler and I just used my chalk marker here and I just drew a line going over my mesh pocket to the top of my binding. And now what I'm gonna do is starting at the bottom, I'm gonna stitch down along both sides of this mark at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is just gonna create 2 separate pockets for me. All right, once you have the center stitched down, let's flip this over so we're looking at the back side. I just find it's easier to trim down the mesh looking from the back. And I'm just gonna round around those corners and along the sides to trim down that pocket so everything is nice and neat. So one of your lining panels is done. You can set this to the side. Now we're gonna work on the remaining lining panel, and this has the elastic bands. Again, always feel things out. If you wanna add a bunch of elastic bands here, do it. If you're like, you know what, I really want a second mesh pocket, or I want some other sort of pocket, you're gonna have to be very careful about orientation later because this pocket does end up upside down in the end. So, if you have a print here, then you're gonna wanna install the pocket upside down like this. Those are things you're gonna have to think about later, but you can have a lot of fun with these pockets, but I'm going to do the elastic per the pattern. So using the midpoint marks you made on the side of your lining panel, you're going to measure so that you have a 3/8 inch gap between two marks on either side of this midpoint mark. So when I use my ruler, I'm going to line up that midpoint mark on the side panel right between the 1/8 and 1/4 inch marks on my ruler. So that's going to help me. And then I'm going to mark right on the edge of the ruler at the 0 point, and then I'm going to mark at the 3/8 inch point. We want to install these so that they're 3/8 of an inch apart from one another. Now I will tell you my elastics are a little on the short side, so I will have to stretch them in order to get them to work. Yours might be longer. I'm not sure. I know that elastic has a tendency to shrink sometimes. So I will be stretching mine to get this to work, which is perfectly fine. So I'm going to just start with one side over here, and I'm just lining up the edges of my elastic so that the innermost edges line up with those marks, and I'm just going to stitch these down at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, now I got the right side done, so I'm going to pull these over to the left side and clip them in place. And I know that it's pulling on the lining. In the end, it's fine. I don't have any problem attaching this. I had the same thing happen with my tester bag. So in the end, this will be flat and it will be fine in the bag. But again, you just work with what you got. You just work with what you got. If you got longer elastic, then use longer elastic. So I'm going to stitch down these at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance over here on the left. So now using those midpoint marks, I marked the midpoint around my elastic for the top piece. I don't know if you can see, but I have 2 marks right above and below the elastic. The reason I didn't mark the elastic is because you can see it can move around, and I'm going to flatten this out at the machine and then stitch it down right in the middle. So it's best if I mark the placement marks on my material. And then for the bottom elastic, I measured just under 4 inches in from each side. So just a little less than 4 inches from the left, and I made the marks over the elastic. Same thing here on the right, and I'm going to stitch 2 stitches down where those marks are. I'm stitching this down at a regular stitch length of 2.5 millimeters, back stitch at the beginning and the end, and also tie off those threads on the back. All right, once you have these stitched in place, if you'd like, you can grab a lighter and you can just melt down the edges of your elastic because it does fray quite a bit. We want to seal those edges. There we go. Now grab both of your main exteriors and both of your main lining panels. So let's start with the front panel. I'm going to have the OklaRoots tag one be the front panel. So I'm going to grab that one, and I'm going to grab the lining panel that has the mesh pocket, and I'm going to take these and lay them wrong sides together. The top of both of these are the top. So the top of my front panel and the top of my lining panel are both on the top. This is going to be important as we go through the pattern because some of these, when you open them, they're going to be upside down. So you need to arrange everything that way. Taking your time is key here. So with these wrong sides together, I'm going to line up their midpoint marks and their corners, and I'm going to clip them together. All right, once you have these clipped together, just double check, whenever you have the handle up, the front panel should be facing up with the top here. Back panel should be facing up with the top here. Let's go baste along all the clipped edges for this front panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And when you're basting this in place, you're gonna wanna have the exterior side facing up so you can keep an eye on the strap handle. Just make sure you're always checking that you're catching the lining as well. All right, once you have that basted, just take a look. It looks so good, and it just feels so good. I love this material. Okay, so now we're gonna do the same thing with the other panel. I will walk you through it because this one, if you have a tighter elastic like I do, then you might have some struggles, so we'll talk about it. So in this case, your lining panel is going to be upside down, all right? Because again, in the end, when this bag opens and is hanging, this is going to be upside down from the back panel. So just trust me. Back panel, right side up, just like this. Top is on the top. Lining panel, top is on the bottom here. So it's right side up, top is on the bottom. The top is considered the part of the elastic that has the middle stitched down, not the 2 stitches, just the 1 stitch. So just like this. And now we're going to take these and we're going to pull them wrong sides together just like that. Once again, match up those midpoint marks and the corners and clip these wrong sides together. So once you have this all clipped together, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to take this to the sewing machine with the exterior side up, and you're going to baste it at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Just again, make sure that when the exterior is right side up and the top is on the top and you flip this over, the top of your lining is on the bottom, so it's opposite. And you can see after I baste this on, the fact that my elastic was a little short is not a problem anymore. If anything, it's actually going to be great because it's going to have a nice tight fit around anything that I put in here. For example, if I were going to use this to like hold scissors or something like that, I could slide this in here and it will hold them nicely. You see what I'm saying? So I like the elastic being pretty tight because it will just hold other items. If you have really bulky items, maybe you don't want it so tight, but I would be using this bag probably for sewing supplies mostly. So something like this works great for me. Okay, you can set these to the side. All right, now we're gonna work on the zipper pockets. And this is like all the zipper pockets except for the main zipper. So we have a lot going on here. I'm gonna walk you through a couple of these pockets. About 3 of them are pretty much the same thing. So I'm gonna show you how to do one of them and then I'll do the other 2 off camera. And then we'll do the mesh pocket together as well. So what we need are our 2 clear panels from the A panel and our 2 clear panels from the B panel. And then you're gonna need your 2 longer zippers and your 3 shorter zippers, your mesh, this is the remaining small mesh pocket, and then a whole bunch of binding, which we're gonna kind of mix up a little bit today. So let's start with the mesh pocket. You're gonna grab some binding. Once again, I always just kind of roll it out and get a piece that's just a tidbit longer than necessary. Not too much longer because you do need most of this binding. You're gonna be using a lot of it, but just a little bit longer. And then I'm gonna find the back side with the wrong side up. I'm gonna fold this in half to find that midpoint mark. Now I'm gonna show you 2 different ways of doing these zipper pockets with this binding. One is going to have raw edges and one will not. So the pattern has it so that you leave the raw edges of your binding on the sides. And then another way that Gabby was doing that I thought was a great idea, we'll have it so that the raw edges are tucked in. However, you will be using a lot of double-sided tape for that. So there's pros and cons to everything here. So just like before, once I have that midpoint mark made, either with a marking tool or by folding, I'm gonna add some double-sided tape just to one side of this. Then I'll remove the paper. Then I'll take my mesh and lay it over that tape, making sure the long edge of my mesh lines up with that midpoint mark. And then I'm gonna grab some clips and I'm just gonna fold this back down, clipping the binding in place. Now you're gonna take your zipper and you're gonna use more tape. There's a lot of tape here. We're gonna take our zipper and we're going to have it so that the zipper closes towards the left. So the zipper when closing goes to the left. And we're gonna grab some double-sided tape and we're gonna add it to the very bottom edge of your zipper tape. And you can be using 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch, whichever size you're more comfortable with. And then remove the paper from your tape. And then you're going to take your mesh pocket here, and if you have clips, you're gonna wanna remove those real quick. And you're going to just tape this down over that tape like that. Now, I like the folded edge to be about 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper teeth. So it's close to the zipper teeth, but it's not touching them. Now, where the zipper pull is here, it probably will touch them, but we'll move that around in just a moment. So we're just going to lay this down and just do your best to get as straight as possible. And you see when I move this, then the zipper teeth will move further away from the binding. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along both edges of our binding at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you're gonna want a zipper foot here. So you're gonna go right along the folded edge of your binding at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and then turn around and go along the raw edge of your binding at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so we can set this to the side now. Now we're gonna work on the clear vinyl. So with the clear vinyl, I'm using pattern piece B. You're gonna measure down 2 inches and you're gonna cut it. You're gonna separate it. We're gonna do this for a lot of pockets. So you're gonna cut it 2 inches from the top. So if you have a directional print or something like that, think about that. It's gonna be 2 inches from the top. And then you're gonna grab 2 pieces of binding, one for the bottom piece, one for the top piece. Trim those down. So you see for the binding we just did, the bottom edge of the binding is the raw edge of the binding. If you don't mind that, then continue doing it like this, where you wrap this around the top and bottom edges of your clear vinyl. That's fine. I'm going to show you another way to do this where we tuck in those raw edges so that it's folded edge on top and bottom. So I'm going to grab one of my pieces of binding and I'm going to fold it long sides together, wrong sides together. All right, and that's just to find that midpoint mark. So then I'm going to open it back up and I'm going to grab my 1/4 inch double-sided tape and I'm going to add the tape right over that midpoint mark. So you either marked it with a marking tool or you folded it, whichever one is easiest. I should probably use a marking tool next time actually. Should probably use a pen. That'll be easier to see if I have a pen there. And then remove the paper from that tape. And now you're going to take the long raw edges of your binding and you're going to fold them back, wrong sides together to meet that midpoint mark. And it's going to also attach to the tape. So do this for both long raw edges. All right, so now you have a piece of binding that's 1/2 inch tall and the width of your panel, and you have no raw edges. So I'm gonna repeat that with the other piece of binding that I have here. Okay, so once I have both of my binding pieces, you can see I have not attached them to my clear vinyl yet. If you're doing it per the pattern, then you would have taped these, wrapped around the long edges of your clear vinyl. This method, we don't do that yet. We don't wrap it around the clear vinyl at all, actually. So now grab one of your 11-inch zippers, and with the 11-inch zipper closing with the zipper pull going towards the left, we're going to grab, this time I'm gonna grab the 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape. If you wanna use the 1/4 inch wide, go for it. It doesn't matter. It's just gonna be a lot of tape here. And if you prefer, you could actually baste down your clear vinyl to your zipper and not use tape for this step at all. That's another option if you'd like. So I've got some double-sided tape on the bottom edge of my zipper. I'm gonna remove the paper, and then I'm gonna take the clear vinyl and I'm going to lay it over so that it overhangs by about 1/4 of an inch along the zipper tape. So it's okay if it's a little short or a little high. You just don't want it too close to the zipper teeth because we still want to attach the binding over this. Okay, and like I said, if you prefer, instead of using tape here, you could just baste this down at the sewing machine. Now we have the clear vinyl taped onto the zipper, and what we want to do now is we're pretty much just going to tape down the binding over that top edge of the clear vinyl so you can't see it anymore, and it's also going to cover the bottom edge of your zipper tape. More double-sided tape here. If you feel comfortable just taking this to the sewing machine and stitching it down without the tape, go for it. After a while, we're gonna have 1, 2, 3 layers of double-sided tape. You will be stitching over some of those. It can gunk up your needle, it can. It is pretty easy, and it gives you a really nice finish with no raw edges. So I just added that double-sided tape right along the top edge of my clear vinyl. Remove the paper. And then the back side has those raw edges. That's gonna go down, and this is going to cover the top edge of my clear vinyl as well as the bottom edge of my zipper tape, and it's gonna be about 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper teeth. So you see, and it's just a really nice polished look. No raw edges anywhere. It looks nice on the front. It looks fine on the back. You don't really ever see the back. So now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch along both long edges of my binding here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So when sewing with clear vinyl, if you find that the clear vinyl is kind of sticking to parts of your sewing machine, especially the bed where it's underneath the clear vinyl, grab some of that paper that came with it and just lay it underneath. It doesn't have to completely cover every single bit of clear vinyl, just most of it, and then you're gonna have a much easier time. So sometimes I'll just keep this next to the machine, and if I'm like, this is giving me a headache, just slide it under, just enough so you can keep sewing. And if you do accidentally sew over this, it's really easy. It's just tissue paper, so it just pulls right out of the stitches. Okay, so how cute does that look? I love this. So now we're gonna do the same thing for the top. When you're attaching the top, the big thing to remember is to line up the sides. You don't wanna attach it like this, right? Where the sides are totally off. You want them to be lined up as much as possible. I'm trying to decide if I want to base this on. I don't think I do, because I know that my presser foot will stick to this clear vinyl and it will cause me a headache. And you know what? I just don't need that. This bag takes a good amount of time and I love making it, but I don't need any headaches. So I'm just gonna once again add double-sided tape, this time to the very, very top edge of my zipper tape. And then, like I said, make sure you match up the sides of your clear vinyl with the sides on the bottom. Okay, keep this as together as possible. All right, that looks pretty good. This is easier if you're doing this on a gridded cutting mat because you can use the grids to help line everything up. So once I have that done, I'm going to attach some double-sided tape right along the edge of my clear vinyl, and then take the paper off of that, and then attach my remaining piece of binding, right side up, wrong side down, over that, again about 1/8 of an inch away from the teeth. And I know there's a lot of eyeballing here, and that can be difficult for especially newer sewers. Remember, this type of tape, you can always lift this back up and redo it if you need to, and you got a seam ripper if you need it. I use a seam ripper all the time. I'm not a beginner. It is what it is. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and top stitch along both long edges of that top binding at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that done, go ahead and trim down your zipper and binding so it's the same size as your clear panels. You can see I also did top stitch down over my zipper ends because it likes to open up quite a bit. And as always, grab a lighter and melt down the ends of your zipper tape You don't want to have to deal with fraying as you're working on it. So now you can take the pattern piece for this, or you can take one of your lining B panels and just lay your lining B panel right side up, lay your clear pocket over it right side up, and match up the top corners. And I like to clip these in place. Here we go. Because you can see it's too long, and so we need to trim it down. But we're going to trim it down from the bottom, not the top. So make sure the top is good. Here we go. And if you're comfortable, you can just grab your scissors and just trim this down. Or if you need to trace it, you can trace it. Let me see if I can just flip this over. I think I can just flip it over and cut. And just be careful, you don't want to accidentally cut your lining panel. Just the clear vinyl. And if it's not perfect, that's fine. It can still overhang a little bit. We'll clean it up later if we need to. All right, that's out of the way. So now this, look how cute that is. Isn't it fun? I love this stuff. Okay, now take that lining panel out of the way again. You don't need that. All right, I don't think you can see that at all because I can barely see it. But I measured 3 1/4 of an inch up from the bottom edge. The pattern says 3 1/2 inch. I found that to be pretty tight with my material. I had a hard time on the first one getting the mesh to come down where I need it to be. We're attaching the mesh pocket here, by the way. So I measured 3 1/4 inches up from the bottom edge and used my vinyl pen here to mark a line. It's not very visible, but that's okay. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my small mesh pocket and I'm going to grab the 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape and I'm going to add it right along the very, very top of my zipper tape. This is the side that's not attached to anything. I'm going to remove the paper. So take your clear B panel right side up, move everything out of the way. And then you have your mesh pocket here with the tape on the top. And remember, both these zippers close towards the left. We're going to take this zipper and we're going to lay it right side down. And this now bottom edge of our zipper tape, just that raw edge, we're going to line that up right with that 3 1/4 inch or 3 1/2 inch mark. Once you have that lined up, make sure the mesh is lined up with the sides here. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the bottom edge of this zipper tape, and then you're going to sew again at another 1/8, so 1/4 of an inch away from the raw edge. So 2 rows of stitches, one at an 1/8 of an inch, one at 1/4 of an inch. All right, once you have the zipper stitched down, now you're going to flip this down so the zipper is right side up, and the mesh is going to come down to the bottom edge. So you gotta, it's going to be a tight fit. That's okay, it's supposed to be. So just get the bottom of your mesh lined up with the bottom edge of your clear vinyl and clip together. I like to start on the bottom edge first and then I'll work on the sides. There we go. And then clip down the sides as well. Everything should be pretty well lined up. Luckily mesh is pretty stretchy, so if you need to kind of stretch it somewhere, then stretch it there. Okay, now we're going to baste down the sides and the bottom at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Also go over your zipper teeth so you don't have to worry about the zipper falling off at any point. And you're doing it an 1/8 of an inch from the clear vinyl, not an 1/8 of an inch from the mesh, just in case your mesh overhangs anywhere. All right, it's so cute, isn't it? I love these pockets. They're just so cute. So flip this over and trim down your zipper tape and your mesh so that it's all lined up with the clear vinyl. I'm going to grab my lighter and I'm going to melt down the edges of the zipper tape that I just trimmed. So that's how you do one clear pocket. Now, the remaining 2 A clear panels and the remaining B panel with their zippers and binding are going to be done the exact same way. You're just not going to attach the mesh pocket. You won't have a mesh pocket. So what we did by cutting off 2 inches, you're going to do it for all 3 of these. You're going to cut the top 2 inches off of all 3 of these, and you're going to attach the zippers and the binding the same exact way we did this one here. You just don't have a mesh pocket to add on to the bottom. That's all. So I'm going to do all that off camera because it is the exact same thing I just showed you just before the mesh pocket. Choose which binding is easiest for you. I'm going to be doing it where I fold the binding back so I have no raw edges. It's very simple, but I'll meet you back once I have all these pockets done. Okay, so once you have all your pockets, this is how it should look. You have 2 B pockets, the one that we made together with the mesh, and then another one that's just the zipper. I've already trimmed these down and everything using the templates and the lining panels and things like that. And then you have 2 bigger ones that are using the A panels. So this is the 4 major pockets. Takes a little while, but it's not hard. All right, so now we're gonna work on the hanging sleeve. You're gonna need both of your B clear pockets, both of your B lining, both of your B exterior, the 2 hanging connectors and then your hook and a good amount of bias tape. So the first thing we're gonna do is build our hanging connectors. So you can grab some clips and you're gonna fold these right sides together, long sides together, and clip along the sides. The long edge we're not gonna sew, but we are gonna sew the sides together. So again, this is just right sides together. We're gonna do these individually. Now we're gonna take these to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the two short edges that are clipped at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have these sewn, just cut off the corners at little 45-degree angles. This will help reduce bulk. And now flip these so that they're right side out. And if it's helpful to use some sort of a turning tool to poke out those corners, go ahead and do it. You want nice, strong corners here. And then we're just going to straighten out these seams and clip along the seams and also clip along the long raw edge so that these are now folded with wrong sides together. So do this for both of them. Now we're going to top stitch along the two short edges and then the raw edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now grab one of your exterior B panels and you're going to mark a midpoint along the top long edge of it. And then I'm going to use my ruler and we're going to measure 2 inches down from that top midpoint mark. And I'm just going to trace along the bottom side, the bottom edge, and a little bit up the other side of my 1 inch by 6 inch ruler to create like a little open rectangle. And then I'm going to grab some double-sided tape and I'm going to add a couple pieces or just one piece at a diagonal, but add a piece of double-sided tape to the back side of your hook. So remember I have it folded on the back here. I want to add a piece that's like diagonally, just like that. Then I'm going to remove the paper. And I'm going to lay this wrong side down and I'm just going to tuck it right into that rectangle box that I made. There we go. And this should go straight up to the top edge. I'm going to use some of these longer clips here to help hold that in place. There we go. And if you'd like to have a little piece of stabilizer on the back here, you definitely can. So I've just got a small piece of Decovil Heavy here. You could use Decovil Light, Fusible Fleece, whatever you'd like. And I'm just going to tape this down. You could fuse it down, but I don't feel like waiting for my iron to warm up. And I'm just going to tape this to the back of the bottom part of my sleeve here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew over this bottom edge here, and I want a little bit of extra reinforcement on this so that way when this is pulling on a lot of heavy stuff it doesn't rip my fabric. So now I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to measure up 3/4 of an inch from the bottom folded edge of my little tab here. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to trace the side top stitching at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, top stitch over the bottom edge, top stitch right over that drawn line, and I'm also going to do a little X. So by doing this I end up going over a few of the outside edges a couple times, which is ideal for me because I want it to be super sturdy. Alright, so you see how I have it nice and stitched on there, and then you can see it stitched right over the back on my little Decovil Heavy piece too. That is optional, but you know, you don't want this to rip at some point. That would be so sad. Okay, set this to the side. Grab your clear vinyl panel that has the mesh pocket and grab one of your lining panels, and you're just gonna lay this right side up, both of them. So both of them are right side up, just like this. And then I'm gonna use clips to clip these together. So I always like to start on the corners, and then I work my way along the sides. And we're going to be layering up a bunch of different things here. If at any point you're like, I don't think I can keep all this together, you can base things down on their own. So like if you just want to base this clear vinyl onto the lining real quick so you don't have to worry about this slipping around, go do it. Just base along all the edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so you have your lining, and now grab that exterior piece that we just dealt with and lay your exterior wrong side up with the hook on the top, and with these zippers closing towards the left, top on top. We're going to lay the lining right side up over it. So the exterior and the lining are wrong sides together. And now just include the exterior in those clips. Okay, once you have these clipped together, make sure you have the bottom edge of this exterior marked, the midpoint marked, and then grab one of your sleeves and mark the midpoint on the raw edge of one of the connectors here. And you're going to take this little connector piece and you're going to lay it so the raw edge is along the same raw edge as the bottom here. I want to flip this around so it's easier to see. Match up those midpoint marks and include it in the clips. Like I said, I know we have a lot of things kind of clipped together right now, So if at any point you want to base things down before you add on the next piece, go ahead and do it. You're not going to damage anything. All right, so we have the hanging connector just like this with the folded edge going in towards the center. We have the exterior just like this. We flip this over, we have the lining, and we have the zipper pockets all right side up. We're going to baste all these together at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do this with the exterior side up. And just be careful. Like I said, if you need some of that paper, you can grab it and just tuck it underneath here so that you don't have to worry about the clear vinyl sticking to anything. Just go slow. Looking good. Okay, always double check and make sure it looks right in the pattern because it's easy to get turned around here. All right, so now we're going to bind around the outer edge of this because this is pretty much a finished product. It doesn't go into a side panel or anything like that. Now, if you have your own preference of binding, go for it. If you want to use quilt cotton binding for these steps, this is kind of a different type of binding than what we did for the pockets. So if you prefer a quilt cotton binding for this, I think that would look really nice. That's going to give you really nice smooth corners. I'm going to do what's kind of considered like a sloppy binding, but it's quick and it's easy and it still looks good in the end, so I'm fine with it. But I'm just going to pretty much fold this and wrap it around the edges and sew it on. And it looks great on the straight edges, it's just the curved edges where it can get a little kind of crinkly. Again, in the end result, I think it looks fine. I like it, but that's personal preference. There's a lot of different ways to do binding. So let's work with this with the exterior right side up. Make sure you have your clips. I'm just gonna grab the binding and I'm just going to, once again, like I said, I pre-folded it and I'm just gonna wrap it right around that edge and clip in place. And I'm gonna do this around the entire panel. When you get to the top here where your hook is, make sure you pull that tab out of the way. You don't want to bind over that. And then once you get to the beginning where you started putting the binding on, you can just wrap this over it. If you'd like to fold in the short edge of your binding so you don't have it raw, that's perfectly fine. With this type of material, it's fine if it's not folded in, it's fine if it is. It's up to you, dealer's choice. All right, once you have it clipped in place, we're gonna take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna use a top stitch length for this, and I'm doing it a 1/4 of an inch in from the folded edge. Just take your time here. Make sure you're always tucking that binding so it's nice and tight. Try not to let anything shift around because you do want to make sure you catch the bottom edge as well. And I'm going to be sewing this with the exterior right side up. All right, after you get done sewing it, make sure you check the back and you caught everything. It looks good. So now this panel is done. So you can set this to the side now. So now grab your remaining B lining panel and lay right side up and then lay your clear zipper panel over that. This is the one without the mesh. And let's clip these together. So now take your exterior panel and if you have directional print, you're gonna think about that, top on top, flip it wrong side up, and then take your lining, flip, keeping it right side up, and lay it wrong sides together with the exterior, and include the exterior in your clips. So this is how the lining side should look, and make sure you move your zipper towards the center so you don't have to worry about that. Here's the exterior side, and now make sure you have the top edge of your exterior midpoint marked already, and then grab your remaining hanging connector, and this time we're going to attach it to the top edge. So the last one we attached it to the bottom, this one we attached to the top. So just use the midpoint on the raw edge of your connector and line it up with the midpoint on the top of your panel and clip in place. And now you can take this to the sewing machine and baste around the entire panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have that basted, now we're just going to attach the binding the exact same way we did the other panel. So we can briefly walk through it together, but it's the exact same thing. So just like I did before, I'm just pre-folding my binding so that it's easier for me to attach. And if you would like to put some double-sided tape along one of the edges of your binding, that you would wrap around like the lining side. It would be the binding that touches the lining side since you don't see that. You can definitely do that. Once again, I'm just going to wrap this around one of the straight edges and I'm going to clip this in place. All right, and just like before, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you're using 1 inch wide binding and you want to do a 3/8 inch seam allowance, you can. You just might not catch the back binding, so it's a hard one. You could always do a second row of stitches too if you'd like. All right, so when you flip up the connector, it should look just like this. The lining, connector on the top, exterior, connector. It's looking good. Set it to the side. So now we're going to work on the side panel. You have your 4 exterior, your 4 lining cuts of side panel, and then you have your lining and exterior smaller cuts, and then you have your zipper tape and your 2 zipper pulls. Go ahead and install your zipper pulls. You're going to attach one on one end, the other on the other end, so they close coming together and they open moving apart. And after you attach those, just melt down those edges. There we go. So you see as they come together, they close, apart they open. That's how they should be on there. So let's start with 2 of your large exterior side panels, and you're going to lay them right sides together. And we're just going to focus on one edge over here. Grab some clips and clip these right sides together. And now sew along this short clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have that stitched, just trim down your corners. Now turn this right side out and push the seam allowance to the left. Now this is not really a directional print so much on the side, so I'm not really worried about that. And if you had a directional print, the top would be right here, the bottom would be on the bottom, and then the seam allowance presses over towards the left side, and then top stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance on that left side of the seam. Now I'm not adding any sort of foam or stabilizer to this, but if you were, you could go ahead and add it now. It's fine without it. It would be beautiful with it. It would just be a little bit more bulky for domestic machines to try to sew. So now grab the short edges of your long strip that you just sewed together and place them right sides together. And you can use clips to hold them in place. And then sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. And then turn this right side out. And then you're going to want to push the seam in the same direction as the other side. So when I open this up and I look back here, I see my seam right here is pushed over towards the left. I'm going to do that with this one as well. I'm going to push that seam towards the left. So in the end, what we want is we want the top stitching on the same spot. It's not the end of the world if it's on different spots. I didn't do this properly in my other bag. But if you lay them both flat like this, I can see my seam that I already did, and the top stitching here is on the left. And when I lay this bottom seam I just sewed, I want the top stitching to be on the left as well. So my seam is going to go towards the left, and I'm going to top stitch this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so now you have one loop. You're going to grab your remaining 2 exterior panels and then your 4 lining panels, doubling them up. And you're going to repeat this for these 3 other sets. So you're just going to make 3 more loops the same way we made this one right here. Okay, once you have all your little loops done, you're going to pair them up, one lining with one exterior. And you're going to lay the lining wrong side out and the exterior right side out and just match up the seams. And I'm going to match them up so that the seams are going in opposite directions. So just kind of move around your material until you get that. So the lining is going in the opposite direction of the exterior. I also marked the midpoints along all the edges of all 4 of my strips. So I just matched up the seams, and then I marked the midpoints between the seams on all of these. So with my exterior and lining wrong sides together, I'm just kind of tucking the lining in there, and I'm matching up the seams first. Like I said, seams are moving in opposite directions, so that way we avoid bulk. And then once I have the seams matched up, then I'm going to go find the midpoint marks, and I'm going to match up the midpoint marks. And then you can straighten out these sections and clip along the straight edges. Try to make sure it's flat when you're clipping it, or else it'll feel like they don't fit. They do fit, just flatten them out first. So do this along both long edges. All right, so this is what one combo should look like. Go ahead and repeat that with your other lining and exterior combo. All right, once you have these both all clipped together, you're gonna sew along all the raw edges. You're gonna baste at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold it all together. Remember, everything is right side out. Okay, your side panels should look just like this after basted. So you can set these to the side now. So now let's do the zipper gusset. So take your zipper and lay it right side up. Grab the exterior zipper gusset piece and lay it right side down over one end of your zipper and clip in place. Now we can take this to the sewing machine, and we're just going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have that sewn on, take the opposite end of that piece of fabric and you're going to lay it right side down on the other end of your zipper and just sew along this edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you should have a loop just like this. Now we're going to do the same thing with the lining cut. So looking at the back of your zipper tape, grab your lining cut and lay it right side down along the back edge and clip along that short edge. And now sew the lining on at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, this part can be a little tricky. You want to keep your zipper straight as you kind of tuck it around. And it's going to twist on itself, but just do your best to make sure you keep it straight while you're twisting it. Does that make sense? So I have my lining here, and I'm just going to kind of trace it along the back of my zipper tape until I get to the other short edge over here where just my exterior is sewn on. And I'm going to use a clip to clip this in place, and I'm going to sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, backstitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now you can just flip this zipper so it's right side out, and your little contrast piece should be just like this. When the zipper's right side out, you see the exterior, on the back you see the lining. Now, keeping this as flat and straight as possible, go ahead and top stitch along all 4 edges of this at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you're going to be holding the exterior and the lining wrong sides together. Once you have it top stitched, sorry I didn't have a camera on for that, but once you have the top stitch, this is what your zipper should look like. So now you can line up your zipper and then your top side panel and your bottom side panel. Find the midpoint along your contrasting piece of your zipper gusset here. And then while you're here, go ahead and find the midpoint on your zipper tape as well. You can just mark it with a pen or clip into it. If you do clip into it like I do, you want to make sure you grab a lighter and you melt that area that you clipped. And then if you want to use those midpoint marks, you can line them up so you can find the midpoint marks between them, so your quarter marks. This just helps with installing everything later. It's not necessary, but if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. Now take your side panel and then take your zipper panel, and you're going to lay these right sides together. So the exterior on your zipper gusset is going to match up with the exterior on your side panel here, and match up those midpoint marks. So the seams on the side panel are over here on the sides. And just clip these together, right sides together, around the entire edge. You're going to clip the zipper completely on there. So I need to flip this around a bit. So this is where all those quarter marks come in handy. So I can find my other midpoint mark on my zipper. And again, I'm just working on this top edge of the side panel. I'm going to clip these together. And then using the seam, I can match that up with those quarter marks that I made and clip those together. And then once I do this for both sides, I can just clip right along the straight edges. All right, once you have this clipped in place, go ahead and baste around this entire top clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so this is what it should look like, specifically like this. Keep it like this. And I'm just gonna tell you, I screwed up a lot of the next steps on the first bag because I ended up opening this up. Don't do that. Keep it like this, okay? Okay, so now we're gonna work on the top panel assembly. And one thing you gotta note is this is not difficult, but orientation is important. It can get a little confusing here. I had to seam rip quite a bit after the first bag just because I didn't quite put it all together right. So I'm hoping that today we're gonna do it right. We'll see. So the first thing you wanna take is your main clear panel A and then the zipper gusset. You can put the other things to the side for now. Okay, and this is the first thing that threw me off. One thing you need to keep in mind, the zipper needs to stay like this. Do not open it up like this. The zipper is going to stay folded right side together with that side panel, just like this, okay? And if you haven't already, make sure you mark midpoints on the top edges and also on the side edges of your clear panel, and make sure that you have your midpoints already marked on your zipper and your side panels, which you should have from the previous step. Okay, so take your zipper panel and make it stand on its edge like this with the folded over edge just like this. So you're looking at the lining side of the zipper. So the back of the zipper is folded down. That's the big thing. And have it like this. And then grab your clear panel, and your clear panel is going to be right side up. And the bottom edge of your clear panel, the midpoint mark there, is going to match up with the midpoint mark right along this edge here. And this is the seam between the side panel and the zipper. So clip those together, and then go to the top of your side panel, find that midpoint mark, and line it up with the top midpoint mark on your clear panel and clip those together as well. And then over here on the sides, find that side mark on your clear panel and line that up with the seam on your side panel. And then find the other midpoint mark on your clear panel and line that up with the seam on the side panel. This just makes it easier for me anyways to get everything spaced out correctly. All right, and now I'm just gonna focus on the straight edges of my clear panel. And then I'll deal with the corners last. Okay, once we get to the corners, we're just going to stretch that gusset around the corners. And honestly, this clear vinyl we're using is pretty malleable, so you can kind of just smush it in there. You don't really have to spread out the side gusset. But if you're using a stiffer clear vinyl and you find that it's starting to crinkle up real bad in the corners, what you can do is you can spread out the side panel. So you're just gonna clip into it. So you're clipping into the side panel and the zipper. There's a few layers of material there, and you can just gently clip in about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge around. They're spaced, my clips are spaced like 1/2 inch apart, and then that will allow that side panel to spread out around the corners of your clear vinyl. But like I said, with this clear vinyl, you actually can just kind of smush it in there and it's gonna be fine. Trust me, I've sewn this multiple times because I messed up. So do this for all 4 corners. All right, now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna baste this in place all around the clipped edges. You wanna do it with the clear panel down, so it's always easiest, trust me. It never seems like it's easiest, but it is. It's always easiest when you have the exterior wall piece here that's wrapping around, when you have that up, that side up. As always, if you have clear vinyl that's sticky, grab some of your tissue paper or whatever backing you have and just slide it underneath so you don't have to worry about this sticking to anything while you sew it, and just carefully go around everything. Use a stiletto and make sure you're using a zipper foot. Okay, so once you have that basted, this is what the top should look like. And when you kind of pull this out, you're looking at the back side of the zipper. And when you flip this out like this and you're looking at the back of the clear panel, you're looking at the lining side here of your side panel. Now take the unit you just sewed and lay it so the clear vinyl is facing up, zipper's right side up, just like this. And then you're going to grab your top hanging sleeve and you're going to line it up so that the hook is on the bottom and that little connector up here is on the top. Now, you're gonna wanna mark a midpoint along this top folded edge of your connector. And so this is the exterior fabric is facing right side up. Using that midpoint mark on your connector, line that up with the midpoint mark on the top edge of your clear panel, side panel unit you just sewed together, and clip these together, just like this. And then clip along the entire connector edge. If you need to move a zipper pull or anything out of the way, move everything out of the way. So this is how it should look right now. We have it's the exterior side, I'm kind of like the back side of the top panel here, and then here's your hook. So the hook is showing, and when you lift it up, it'll look just like this. All the zippers are going towards the left. Everything is oriented the same way. This is how it should look. Fold it back down, and now let's just go baste this down right here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I would backstitch at the beginning and the end just to make sure it stays in place. All right, so this is how it should look. Flip it up, all the zippers are good, and remember our zipper is still folded, right? The zipper is still wrong side up because eventually we're gonna fold this up here and this other edge of our zipper tape is going to attach to the entire other side of the unit. So I know it's hard to visualize. It took me a while to see it. But I just want to make sure you guys got that. I think you're good. We're good. All right, and now we're going to bind around that edge. So grab some of your binding of choice, and I'm just going to pre-fold mine. I'm always trying to find which side is the back and the front. I think it's, you know, if you can't figure it out, then it doesn't matter. If you can't figure out which side is the right side, then they're both the right side. It's whatever one you want. So I'm just going to pre-fold my binding because it makes it so much easier to attach. And I'm just going to take my binding and I'm going to start where the connector is. And I'm just going to wrap it around that seam and use clips to hold this in place. Like I said before, if you want to use some double-sided tape on one of the edges of the binding, so specifically like the back side, if you want to use some double-sided tape to hold it down, you can do that. I find with 1 inch wide binding, it doesn't really move out of the seam too easily. I haven't had a problem with it, so I'm just going to wrap. All right, once you have your binding clipped in place, I'm gonna flip this again so I'm looking at the back side of the zipper when I attach this, and I'm gonna top stitch my binding on at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. Use a zipper foot and just go slow as you're moving around those corners. Use a stiletto as well. The stiletto is very helpful with binding. All right, this is how it should look now. It's all binded on. You bound the edge we were working on. You guys don't even know. I put binding on the wrong edge when I was putting this together. I made so many mistakes. That's why you're not going to make any of them, because I'm going to make sure you don't. So this is what it should look like. Again, zipper tape is still wrong side up. Flip this down. If we turn it over to the back, this is what it looks like. Looking good. Okay, now you want to take the side panel and you want to flip it so that it's lining side out. And you have the bounded edge you just did is tucked inside just like this. All right, so if I fold this down, I have the lining right here on the outside. The exterior is tucked in, the zipper is tucked into the bottom here. And then I'm gonna grab my front main panel and I'm gonna make sure I have my midpoints marked on the top, bottom, and sides. And again, with the side panel unit you just made, the hook needs to be on the bottom here. And then take your front panel and lay it exterior right side down. So you have the lining side up, make sure you tuck that handle in, and you're going to attach the top midpoint mark to the midpoint mark on the top of the side panel. And this is the side panel edge that does not have zipper tape on it. And you're gonna just push them so that they're exteriors right sides together and lined up at the midpoint mark. And then turn this around and line up the midpoint marks on the bottom. And then over here on the sides, take the midpoint mark on the side of your front panel and line that up with the seam on your side panel and clip together. Do the same thing on the other side. And then just clip along these straight edges and save the corners for last. All right, once you get to the corners, just tuck in the corner of your front panel into the side panel. And if you need to, grab your scissors and you can cut into the side panel. So not the front panel, just the side panel. Just cut a few slits, like 3 or 4, that are about 1/2 inch apart. And they're about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge. And that will allow the side panel to easily spread around those corners. So you shouldn't have any bunching or pleating or anything like that. So do that for the other 3 corners as well. Okay, once you have all this clipped together, you're gonna flip this so that the side panel is lining side up, and you're gonna baste along that clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Use a stiletto and go slow, and just really pay attention to those corners. Make sure you have the side panel and the front panel lined up and they don't slip away from each other. All right, once you have that basted on, grab your binding, and if you want to pre-fold it, go ahead and do that. Once you have your binding prepped, go ahead and just wrap it around like you've done in the previous steps, making sure to go slow around those corners. All right, once you have the binding attached with your clips, now all you have to do is top stitch this on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. As always, go slow. I like to have the side panel facing lining right side up so that the front main panel is lining right side down, and then use a stiletto to help you get around those corners. A zipper foot here is also really helpful. All right, once you have your binding attached, if you have a really stiff clear vinyl, you're gonna wanna grab a hairdryer and just heat it up to turn this right side out. The vinyl in the B-Box is not stiff, so you should have no problem turning this right side out through that opening in that vinyl zip pocket. Okay, so once you turn this out, you can flip your zipper up so that it's right side out with the exterior. So if you look at the front here, you have your main panel and you have your handle, and when you flip this over, you're gonna have that top flap that kind of covers the clear panel. And then when you open it up, you have your 2 clear pockets and a mesh pocket up here. You have your large clear pocket, and behind that you have your 2 mesh pockets. Isn't that cool? And you see when you close it up, this is half of the bag done. So the other half is going to attach to the other side of the zipper so that when you open it up flat, you're gonna have all these pockets. It's gonna be amazing. Okay, so now we're gonna finish it up. So you need the half of the bag you already made. You need your remaining side panel. You need your bottom flat piece here, the remaining large clear zip pocket, and then the back main panel. So we're gonna start with the back main panel and the remaining side panel. Take your back panel and lay it upside down. So the top is over here on the bottom. And then grab your remaining side panel, and whichever side you want to be the bottom, you're going to attach it exterior right side down, and the midpoint is going to line up with the midpoint on the bottom edge of your back panel. So this is gonna have exterior pieces right sides together. So side panel, back panel, right sides together. Just flip this out, so you should be looking at the lining side. Let's turn this around. And then the other midpoint mark is gonna line up with the top edge of the back panel. Those together. The seam between the 2 side panels is going to line up with the midpoint mark on the short edge. You're gonna do this for both sides. And then just clip along the straight bits and save the corners for last. And then once you get to those corners, if you need to, you can just cut little slits that are about 1/8 of an inch deep, and just 3 or 4 of them right along the side panel only, not the back panel. And that will allow the side panel to spread around these curves. And then just clip them together and repeat this for the other 3 corners. Once you have this clipped in place, you can baste along all the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go slow around the corners. I always like to use a zipper foot for these, and also use your stiletto to help hold everything in place. All right, once you have this basted in place, just grab your binding and attach the binding around the outer edge with your clips. Alrighty, just like before, once you have this all clipped on, we're going to top stitch the binding in place at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Always go slow around those corners, use a stiletto and a zipper foot, and just do your best. Alright, once you have the binding on, you can flip this out so that the side panel is facing exterior side out. And now you can set this to the side for just a moment. Okay, so now grab your main clear panel and then your bottom panel here that has a little connector on it. And make sure you have the midpoints marked on the bottom and top edges and the side edges of your clear panel. And go ahead and mark the midpoint along this connector piece here as well on the folded edge. Okay, with the clear panel right side up and the top on the top, bottom on the bottom, grab your bottom panel and you're gonna turn this around. So it's exterior right side up, but the connector piece is going to be on the bottom. And you're going to line up that midpoint mark on your connector piece with the midpoint mark on the bottom clear panel and just clip these together. And you can see that connector is flipped up. So I'm flipping it away from the exterior piece here and just clip along the entire edge. So I'm just clipping the connector onto the clear vinyl. I did rotate this around to make it easier for me to work with, but the top of the clear panel is down here. So this is up, it's attached to the bottom of it. And just to give you a visual, when this is hanging, it'll hang like this. So both zippers are closing to the left, and it's like this. That's why we attach it to the bottom. Now we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and we're going to baste along this clipped edge right here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so with your clear panel here, right side up, top on top like this, in your bottom flap, oriented just like this. This is how it should look. Grab your back panel that you attached the side gusset to already, and the handle should be on the bottom, all right? That's how it's gonna be. And what you're gonna do is you're just going to lift up the clear panel, and we're going to just plop it right on top of the back panel just like this. And then use your midpoint marks to line up the midpoint with the side panel. So this is considered the bottom of the bag here, right? Because this is the top of the bag, this is the bottom of the bag, but we're attaching the bottom of the bag to the top of the clear panel, okay? So match up those midpoint marks, go over here to the edge where you sewed on that connector, find the midpoint mark and match that up with the top side panel. So this is the top of the bag. And then use the midpoint mark on the side of your clear vinyl and match that up with the seam between the top and bottom side panels. And do the same thing on the other side. And then just clip along the straight edges. And remember, what we're doing right now is we're attaching that clear panel to the side panel. That's it. The clear zipper panel is being attached to the side panel. And then once you get to those corners, if you need to, spread the side panel out a little bit so it can easily wrap around the corner of your clear vinyl. Just add 3 or 4 little snips that are no deeper than 1/8 of an inch. And then those should just wrap right around that clear vinyl. So do this for all 4 corners. Okay, so when you have it clipped together, this is how it should look. The back panel is upside down. The handle's on the bottom, just like this. When we open it up, it should open on the bottom here. The flap should flap down. Zippers should be going towards the left, just like this. This is what it should look like. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're going to baste this on at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Exterior side panel should be right side up. As you do this, just make sure you don't accidentally sew in the flap here, so move it out of your way and go slow. Use a stiletto and a zipper foot and backstitch at the beginning and the end just to make sure it stays in place. All right, once you have that basted on, now we just have to attach it to the other side, which is, it seems hard. This is probably the most difficult sewing step, but it's not that bad. You'll be fine. So the big thing you gotta make sure is you get this oriented right. Top panel, this is your front panel here. It has the zipper on it. Over here on the left, handle on the left. Bottom panel, handle on the right. So they're going to just come like this. So just visualize this first. They're going to come together. They're going to open like this. The top opens like this. The bottom opens like this. Make sure it all is oriented this way and everything looks good. You can unpick everything and resew. Let me just tell you, when I did this step, I was at this step on the first bag and I realized that I attached my zipper on correctly and there was no possible way I could attach this zipper to this bottom piece. I did everything wrong. I had to unpick so much work. And I did, and I resewed the whole thing, and it's beautiful. So, it's okay if you mess up. You can fix it. But what we want to do is we want to open up this zipper. Okay, so open it up all the way. And let's start with the bottom here. So let's take this bottom bit of the zipper here, and you're going to line up the midpoint mark of that with the midpoint mark on the bottom edge here of your bottom panel, I guess. And we're going to pull those exterior right sides together. So just focus on this little bottom fabric part of your zipper gusset and attaching it to the bottom of the other side of the bag. Or I guess it's the top of this bottom part of your bag. I know, it gets confusing. And now what we're gonna do is we're going to slowly attach the zipper. So the zipper is going to be zipper right side against the exterior right side. And so if you need to, you can kind of get it started a little bit. Like, this is not how it's going to stay, but I'm just going to do this to make sure I don't get confused and accidentally twist my zipper around. So I do it like that, and then close this, roll it in if you need to, and then pull the zipper around and flip it around so it stays right side against exterior right side. You should have that midpoint mark on your zipper. Go ahead and line that up with the top midpoint mark of the back panel and then clip together. There we go. And then your side midpoint mark on your zipper tape is going to come and meet up with the seam between the two side panels here. Clip those together. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, and then just slowly go around and clip this zipper right side to exterior right side. And if you need to spread anything around the corners, go ahead and do that. If you need to trim into your zipper tape so that it spreads easily around those corners, that's fine. Okay, so this is the hardest part to sew. You're gonna wanna sew it with this top panel on top and pulled out of the way. It is tricky. It's going to be tricky. Okay, it's going to be especially tricky right here along this bottom of the zipper. Just go around slow, making sure this bottom flap doesn't get in the way. If you need to kind of fold it in a little bit, make sure this hook doesn't get in the way. There's a lot going on. Smush things down so they don't get in your way. Okay, don't worry about anything getting wrinkled. It's gonna get wrinkled. It's fine. We can steam it out, iron it out. If you're using the nylon, you probably won't even see any wrinkles when it's over. Just go slow and use your zipper foot and your stiletto and base this on at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay. That's hard. It is hard. I'll tell you, it took me 5 minutes to base that on. It is very hard. These bottom corners are tricky. I think whenever we do the binding, I need to make sure I tuck everything out of the way more. I had too many pieces of fabric folded up fighting me, but I got it attached. So the very last step is just attaching this binding. Yes, this is tricky, especially because of those bottom corners. When I'm sewing something like this, I always try to like start with the hardest part first so I can just get it over with. Pre-fold your binding if you need to, and then just wrap your binding around that seam. All right, last step. Once again, I'm gonna do it with the side panel up. So I'm looking at the back side of the zipper. Most of it's gonna be very easy. You're not fighting the zipper this time, so that's great. However, right down here, these corners, these are challenging. So if you want to, you might wanna start, I don't know, over here on the side or something. It's hard. It's hard getting around those corners. Just go slow. I promise you, slowing down is the best tool you have. You don't need a more expensive machine. You don't need fancier tools. You just gotta slow down. Slowing down will solve a lot of problems. Again, use a zipper foot, stiletto, 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're gonna top stitch. You got this. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so I apologize. I did not record that. I forgot to turn the camera on. I will tell you though, I accidentally sewed it upside down. I sewed it with this side up. So the zipper was down and I sewed it on like that. It was still really challenging. And I don't prefer to sew it that way because really when you're sewing binding onto a zipper, you got to make sure you can see your zipper tape because you don't want to sew too close to the teeth and you also don't want to sew too far away. So it's not ideal. It doesn't look exactly how I would like it to look normally because I didn't sew it on. However, it is attached, so finished is better than perfect. So I'm gonna count it as a win. All right, so it's all attached. Let's zip it up, make sure it closes. Oh yeah, I gotta poke out all these corners and everything, but it's looking so good. Isn't that such a beautiful bag? Oh yeah, so we need to reach in. I'll show you how to do that. So let's open this up. Open these up, open your clear pockets and reach in and really work on using your fingers to round out those corners. This is where binding is great because the binding is going to help you with this. It acts like kind of like a skeleton in the bag. And so all you gotta do is get it where you want it and then it will pretty much hold it there for you. And if you use the foam in the side panels, it's even better. You're gonna have lots of structure. There we go. All right, so now let's zip it up. How beautiful is this bag? It's just so beautiful. And again, even without the foam on the sides, you have a lot of great structure here. This is such a good bag. I hope you guys love it. It's so fun. Alrighty guys, what do you think? It's pretty much all smooth sailing, right? I would say 99% of this bag is very simple to make. It's that last curve. It's just the last bottom curves. That's why it's important to have material that's not gonna fight you so much. And that's also why I'm happy that we didn't put the foam in the side panels because I feel like that did allow us to really push the material out of the way and get a good sew on these corners. But it is a little challenging. So like I said, depending on your skill level and depending on your sewing machine, you'll know what your limits are. If you're doing this for the first time and you're using a domestic machine like I am, and maybe you're more of like a beginner, confident beginner, you've made a few things, but not a ton, I then definitely, yeah, use like quill cotton or use this nylon material, something that's going to be easy to work with, and then just limit how much stabilizer you're using. You know, we don't use any stabilizer in the side gusset here, but you could also go for a Deco the Light. I would say that the, front and back panels are also optional if you want to stay away from foam. If you just want to do all of it without any stabilizer, go ahead and do that. You're going to lose a little bit of structure because the foam does make it so that it stays very taut like this. However, once you fill it up with stuff, it's going to be fine. I hope you guys love making this bag as much as I do. I can honestly say this is my favorite bag of the year so far. I'm obsessed with it. I love it so much. I'm keeping the pattern. I don't always keep patterns, and I'm keeping it printed out on the side over here. I'm cutting out material for the next one as we speak. I have a lot of ideas, and I'm so excited to make this bag. I love it. I can't. 10 out of 10. Love it. Thank you so much, Jassy, for allowing me to use it, because it's just perfect. I hope you guys are having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.